Hello, my friends. Good afternoon again. This is the third part of the lecture series about conflict analysis. And the last time I gave you the introduction, and in the second lecture, I discussed to you about something about the who or the people involved in conflict. Because every conflict, one of the important elements of conflict is the people involved. And another equally important elements of conflict is the problem or the what. And this will be the topic of my lecture for this afternoon. And allow me to share with you my PowerPoint presentation. And in this presentation, sorry, something is wrong with this. In this presentation, I'm going to uh, use the several analogy in order to be able to explain to you, um, the nature of the problem. So what? The what? So another element of conflict analysis. Okay. The what, when we spoke about the what, it refers to the core problem. So the core problem or issue refers to the specific issues and differences people have between them. And this involves different values, opposing views, incompatible differences regarding the use, distribution, or access to scarce resources. Let us take note of some of the important terminology in this definition because understanding this terminology will shed light on our understanding of the definition of the core problem or the issues. So it involves, of course, differences between people. And when people have differences, there are bases for that. And number one is the values. People fight over values. And in fact, conflict about values is one of the most difficult to resolve because people are not want to give up their values. They stand for it, and they are even willing to die for it. And another is they have different opposing views. They look at the problem from a different point of view. And sometimes, for lack of facility for dialogue, they stick to their own understanding, and this contributes to the enlargement of the problem. Then you also have the incompatible differences and how to share, how to distribute, and to use the scarce resources. So most often, the core problem or issue in conflict are found in this. And let me illustrate, let me make the tree as an illustration, one of the illustration that the branches, the trunk, and the roots. So every tree has a has a set of leaves and branches. Then there's also the trunk and there's also the root. So when we speak of the root, we are referring to the structural or causal causes of conflict. Because like in a tree, for example, the root is the source of life of the tree. And in fact, it is the essence, that it is the essential part that make up the tree. Because without the roots, there will be no trunk and there will be no leaves. So therefore, just as the root is the life of the tree, so therefore, the structural causes of a particular conflict is also the lifeblood of the conflict. The conflict is perpetuated because of these structural or causal factors. So, ibig sabihin, ang lahat ng conflict o kaguluhan o pagtutunggali ay mayroon siyang pinag-uugatan. At ang ugat na ito ay napakahalaga. Kaya kailangan maintindihan natin ang ugat na ito. Kasi minsan, pag tumitingin tayo sa kahoy, ang nakikita lang natin ay yung katawan at saka yung mga dahon at saka mga branches. We do not see the roots. So in other words, pareho din yun sa problema. Pag nakikita natin yung problema o kaguluhan o kaya conflict o kaya pagtutunggali, ang nakikita lang natin yung mga outward manifestation of conflict such as fighting, violence, arguments, and the effects of conflict. Ito lang ang nakikita natin. So hindi natin na-realize na itong mga bagay-bagay na ito ay may pinagmumulan. So here in this illustration, the trunk is one of the most visible part of the tree. So this represents the manifestations of conflict. Then you also have the branches and the leaves, the multitudes of smaller conflict arising from or emerging out of the trunk. So therefore, kung ang trunk is the visible part of the tree, yung mga branches na yun, ito yung mga maliliit na bagay that arise from the trunk. So halimbawa, kung nakikita mo sa isang tunggalian ay barilan, patayan, destructions of properties, of lives. Ngayon, ito ay nagbibigay ng manifestation sa mga maliliit na bagay. For example, this can result to displacement of people. This can result to people being refugees. This can also result to houses being destroyed. This can be result to the life of people being disrupted because of conflict. So yan, that is one example of an illustration. So the roots are the structural or causal factor. Although they are the invisible contents of the tree, the roots are the anchor and the source of life for the tree. Examples of root causes are injustice, poverty, ignorance, deprivation, ethnic prejudice and intolerance, corruption, poor governance, both at the state and traditional levels. Just as the roots left in a soil do not necessarily produce a tree, so roots of conflict only provide potentials for conflict. Other contributing factors like good soil, a gardener, etc. will be needed to produce the conflict tree. So in other words, when we speak of the rootedness of a conflict, we should not also discount the influence of other factors, because there are other factors that might mitigate, or there are other factors that might escalate the problem or contribute to the problem, because sometimes our situatedness, our contextuality sometimes contributes to the life of the conflict. Kasi nga meron siyang environment, meron siyang situation na nag-i-encourage sa ganoong sitwasyon. Okay. And the trunk is the largest visible part content of the tree. It is all where all the roots have converged. It is difficult to distinguish the link of the trunk to a particular string of roots. The trunk gives onlookers some clue about the name and nature of the tree. However, the tendency to associate conflict only to the visible core problem can be deceptive, since this is just a converged expression of many roots with particular differences. As a convergence of the roots, the trunk comprises dimensions of the conflict, depending on whom is analyzing the conflict, and from what vantage point the analysis who is conducting the study may emphasize a particular dimension of the conflict over the other. So in other words, the trunk is only the convergence of the conflict. Kaya pag sinabi natin, for example, mayroong civil war sa Mindanao, naglalaban ang MILF at saka ang government. That is just the trunk of the tree. Sapagkat ang trunk ng tree is just the convergence of the tree, and we cannot identify its connection, specific connection to a particular roots. Kasi yung ugat ng kahoy ay nagsasanga-sanga na siya. In other words, yung mga pinag-uugatan ng problemang yon ay nanggagaling na sa iba-ibang salik ng buhay. At hindi natin na ma-distinguish na ngayon kung saan ito nanggagaling. So in other words, it takes a lot of analysis and understanding and a keen observation in order to be able to link the manifestation of the problem to the root. So kailangan po na ma-connect natin yung manifestation ng problem doon sa root, sapagkat diyan papasok yung application natin sa pag-resolve ng ating mga problema o kaya mga suliranin. Okay. The branches, leaves, and the fruits are the multitude of smaller conflicts of dimensions of the conflict emerging out of the trunk. They are sometimes referred to as effects of the conflict. For example, conflicts between ex-combatants and their communities, the rise in prostitution, family conflicts emerging out of a long years of separation, chieftaincy, dispute as a result of two or more chiefs being appointed by different authorities who occupied the communities during a civil war, land disputes as a result of lands being sold by different so-called owners, etc., are all branches of a conflict tree. So yan po ang mga nakikita natin na yung mga branches, mga leaves, at saka mga fruits ay inihahalin tulad siya doon sa mga specific events conflict events na nangyayari sa community. Okay. Now, if we want to conduct a conflict analysis, a particular case study or analysis of a particular conflict case, then maybe it's better to use a matrix, for example, like this one. This is a 4-column matrix. The first matrix is about the causal factors or root causes. So i-identify mo na doon yung root causes ng conflict. Ano ba yung pinag-uugatan? Poverty, discrimination, ano pa? So kailangan pag-aralan mo ang conflict. Aalamin mo ano ba ang mga pinag-uugatan nito. So in other words, pag nalaman mo na yung ugat o kaya pinagmumula ng conflict na yon, i-analyze mo na siya on the 3-factor level. On the political factor, economic factor, socio-cultural and religious factors. So in other words, ano ang political factors or political context of this problem? Then later on you will have to move to the economic factor of this root cause, then socio-cultural and religious factor of the root cause of this problem. So pag na-matrix mo na yung problem na yun, isa-isa, halimbawa yung problem na yun ay mayroon siyang 5 roots. So therefore, 5 roots din ang ano mo, 5 causal factors din ang i-analyze mo based on the political, economic, and socio-cultural factors. So itong analysis na ito, magagawa mo lang ito kung ikaw ay mayroon kang background sa problem na yon. Therefore, that's why if I give you a case study, if I give you a term paper to do, then you must do a lot of reading, background reading doon sa problem na yun. Kasi hindi mo ma-analyze yung political factors, economic factors, socio-cultural factors kung hindi mo alam yung politika sa lugar na yan. Kung hindi mo rin alam ang mga economic issues nila, economic system nila. So kailangan magbasa. Kung parang sa tao din yan. Gusto mong makilala ang isang tao, kailangan paglaanan mo siya ng pansin, paglaanan mo siya ng oras, kailangan alamin mo siya, kailangan magmarites ka rin tungkol sa taong yan para malaman mo kung sino siya, kailangan mag-background investigation ka. So in other words, when you are given an assignment to do a case study of a particular conflict, kailangan mo ring you have to do a lot of some sort of research din about that particular problem or issues. Okay. When do you use this kind of approach in analysis? You use it with a group having difficulty in agreeing about the core problem in their situation. Halimbawa, you are dealing with a group and hindi nila matukoy kung ano talaga yung root cause ng kanilang problema, then pwede mong gamitin itong conflict analysis tree. Then with a team who need to decide about which conflict issues they should try to address. Kasi minsan may mga problema rin, mga conflict problem na napakaraming issues. So therefore, yung grupo, they would like to make a decision which would become their priority. Kaya so ito kailangan magiging very useful itong conflict tree as a tool. Then kanina, katulad ng the previous lecture that I have shared to you, we discussed about the onion. So this is the onion test. You can use the onion test in order to analyze a conflict. So ang onion baga makikita natin, pag hiniwa mo ang onion, makikita mo na sa gitna meron siyang core part. Then you have the middle part and you have the outer part. So the outer part, the inner part refers to the needs, what we must have. Yan yung nagre-represent ng pangangailangan ng mga tao. Ito ang dapat meron sila para mabuhay silang matiwasay na may dignidad at may kasiyahan sa buhay. Ito yung need. So lahat tayo, all of us in the community, wherever we are, we all agree that all of us have needs. Lahat tayo may pangangailangan. At lahat ng ating mga pagsisikap, lahat ng ating mga ginagawa ay para matugunan itong mga pangangailangan ito. Kaya lang minsan, itong proseso ng pagtugon sa ating mga pangangailangan ay nagiging siyang malabo sapagkat maraming factors sa society ang nagpapalabo nito. For example, Sapagkat hindi lang naman ikaw ang tao, meron din ibang tao. Hindi lang naman kayo ang grupo, meron din ibang grupo. Kaya lang ang mga tao, iba-iba ang kanilang pananaw. Iba-iba ang kanilang pananaw kung paano nila matatamo ang 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 kanilang nais mangyari para matugunan yung pangangailangan nila. Kaya ito yung tinatawag natin na the second layer of the onion. It is the interest. So pag sinabi nating interest, it refers to what we really want. Kumbaga sa Tagalog, ito ang gusto ko. Yan, tandaan natin na may pagkakaiba ang need, pangangailangan at saka gusto ko. Kasi it's possible that you realize your need because of that need, ito ang gusto mong mangyari. May possibility din na yung gusto mo ay hindi siya tumutugma doon sa gusto ng iba. O kaya minsan yung gusto mo, hindi siya tumutugma doon sa pangangailangan mo. So in other words, ngayon, hindi lang ikaw ang may gusto, yung iba may gusto rin. Kaya minsan, yung gusto ng iba is very different from what you want. That's why, dito na nagsisimula yung conflict na tinatawag natin. And then, itong gusto nating mangyari, binibigkas natin ito, sinishare natin ito sa iba, pinapublish natin ito. And this is what we call now the positions. So ano ngayon ang position mo? Ang position ko, ito ang gusto kong mangyari. Yan. So parang may action na. Ito ang gusto kong mangyari. Kasi yung sa gitna ay nasa isip mo lang yun. That is your desire, what you want. Ngayon, sa pangatlong layer, sinasabi mo na, ina-articulate mo na. You are already expressing what you really want. So tandaan natin na the onion has 3 layers: the needs, the interest, the position. Yung need, yun talaga ang pangangailangan natin. All of us share that kind of feeling that we need. Yung interest, yan yung gusto nating mangyari. Yung position, yan yung sinasabi natin, ipinapahayag natin sa iba. So yan, that is the onion test. You can use this tool in conflict analysis. So pinaliwanag ko na ito. Positions are the things we declare publicly. Interest, what we want to achieve from a particular situation. Yung needs are important things we need to satisfy. So the purpose, to move beyond the public position of each party and understand each party's interests and needs, and to find the common ground between groups that can become the basis for further discussion. So ito, ginagamit itong onion analysis na ito kung gusto mong makatulong na ang grupong yun ay mag-move forward na sila. Ibig sabihin, kasi nga, pag mayroong conflict, mayroong polarization. Mayroong polarization, pagkakawatak-watak, pagkakahiwa-hiwalay. So, pag naghihiwa-hiwalay na sila, parang malabo na silang magkasundo. So, para magkasundo, kailangan mahanap natin yung common ground nila. That's why people must move beyond their public position towards understanding their needs and the needs of others, because that will only be the ground for a meaningful discussion, a meaningful dialogue that will help in the resolution of the problem. So when to use it? You can use it as part of an analysis to understand the dynamics of a conflict situation. So in preparation for facilitating dialogue between groups and in conflict, and also as part of mediation or negotiation process. Okay. So meron naman tayong another, aside from the onion, meron isang tayong tool na pwedeng gamitin, yung tinatawag natin na conflict mapping. Ang conflict mapping is a visual technique for showing the relationship between parties in conflict. Yan. So the purpose is to understand the situation better, to see more clearly the relationship between parties, to clarify where the power lies, to check the balance of one's own activity or contacts, to see where allies or potential allies are, and to identify openings for intervention or action, and to evaluate what has been done already. So ito yung purpose ng conflict mapping. So when to use it? Early in a process along with other analytical tools, and later to identify the possible entry points for actions to help the process of strategy building. So may mga variations din ang conflict mapping. Pwede rin siyang geographical, mapping of issues, mapping of power alignments, mapping of needs and fears, as a human sculpture to bring out feelings and relationships. Then another tool that can be used is the ABC triangle. Bakit tinawag siyang ABC? Because yun nga, yung acronym niya, ABC, attitude, behavior, and context. So ang problem ay, ang conflict nagsisimula siya sa attitude, then it is manifested in your behavior, and then it must also be understood based on your context. Pag sinabi natin context, ibig sabihin environment or situatedness. Okay. Now, the ABC triangle is an analysis of factors related to attitude, behavior, and context for each of the major parties. And the purpose is to identify these three sets of factors for each of the major parties, to analyze how these influence each other, and to relate this to the needs and fears of each party, and to identify a starting point for intervention in a particular situation. You can use it early in the process, then later to identify what factors might be addressed by an intervention, and to reveal how change in one aspect might affect another. So, my dear friends, these are the tools that can be used in analyzing a particular problem. So, I hope that you gain some understanding now, and that you will be able to use these tools later on when you will be doing your case study. So, thank you very much for listening.